And welcome back to another episode of Joel's Mind Podcast, where we talk about becoming a better version of you. And on today's episode, we are talking about sobriety. I'm going to talk about my sobriety and the journey that I've been on since I've turned 29, and just highlight what Joel's been going through, also the reasons behind it. And so before I do that, there is someone I want to acknowledge, a friend of mine that has recently passed. May he rest in paradise. I just want to honor him by just a moment of silence. Alejandro Sandoval is a friend of mine that I grew up with. He's succeeded by his older brother and his mom. He was loved by many, but more importantly, he was a brother to many. And he recently passed, and I just miss him. And I wish I had a chance to say bye. But more importantly, I wish I had a chance to be there a little more for him. And this episode is just a gentle reminder of what's out there in this world when we succumb to our hard days, when we don't always win the battle. He was young. Unfortunately, it was his time. And I want to raise awareness for those that are battling addiction, are suffering from any type of mental disorders that leads to substance use, more so substance abuse. These two go hand in hand, and it's very hard to decipher which is which, and also to treat which is which. So with that, I just want to invite anyone that is struggling to call their local resource 411 and to reach out to someone, whether that's friends, resources, family, or even a stranger, and know you're not alone, and know that you're more than just what it is that you might be battling. So with that, Alejandro, I miss you, brother. All right, we're coming back strong with episode 37. And today I want to talk about and dive a little more into my journey in sobriety. And the reason why I'm choosing sobriety, how long it's been, what are some things I've experienced, and, something I can share with the listeners out there. Of course, I highly encourage anyone and everyone to take a tolerance break or just take a break. Take some type of break, whether that's for your phone, whether that's from substances, whether that's from guilty pleasures, whatever it may be. I highly encourage you to challenge yourself. And this is one of many ways to become a better version of you. So with that being said, I started this path of sobriety when I turned 29. It's kind of an odd number. Well, actually, it is an odd number, but it just was something that really spoke to me at that time. I knew I was transitioning into these 30s of mine. I'm currently 31. And so I've had about 2 years of sobriety under my belt, with 2 exceptions. So whether you want to honor those 2 years or if you want to honor when I last indulged in any substances. It's been a long 2 years, but quite honestly, not too long. And so I want to talk about some of the reasons, because there's not necessarily one particular reason. There's many reasons as to why I decide to walk this path of sobriety. And so more importantly, I should highlight is my goal is to live this sober life, this sober version of Joel for 10 years. Now, some of you might be thinking, Joel, why are you going to limit yourself? Why 10 years? Why not do it for a lifetime? Or some of you might be thinking, why 10 years? Why not just a year? Why not 2 years? Why, if you're going to take a break, why not just take a break? And so in that, my perspective on life and the years to come, it has been highly influenced by a class that I've taken in college. And the class that I took was a human development class, where essentially it starts from the time of conception until death. And I've learned a really lot, and it gave me some great perspective on what to expect and what to come through these transitions in our lives, from infancy to early adolescence to young adulthood to middle age adulthood to our elderly years, and when we start to deplete physiologically, if that's the right term. With that, it has really given me this unique perspective of wanting to live as long as I possibly can, to be honest. If I'm being truthful, my goal is really to be a centurion. And I'm not gonna lie, the last couple of years is something which is kind of debating. I just want to live as long as I possibly can and make the most impact I possibly can as well. I'm gonna be honest, I would find that challenging if I did not get to spend that with my wife for as long as possibly. So, this is me today, September 6th, 2025. I'd like to live as long as possibly can with my wife and, succeed that as long as possibly can, with joy in my heart, without misery accompanying me. Part of me at a younger age wanted to live that long so I could be old and raggedy and tell the younger generation that they didn't have it as hard as me, because I thought that's what you do when you're old. You get to look beneath you and say, back in my day, you know what I'm saying? So that is something it was just a very overzealous version of me that was like, I want to live until that age. But truthfully, the real meaning behind it was, the more in depth I go, it's really, I would love to see the growth in society, and I'd love to see the changes, and more importantly, I'd love to be a part of the growth, and I'd love to be a part of those changes in our society, in our world. And as we all know, there's a lot of work to be done, and so I'm gonna need to live as long as I possibly can. And in that mindset and that way of thinking, if I'm going to live that long, I want to know a sober version of Joel. Now, when I was turning 29, 30 was right around the corner. And I'm not going to lie, there was a lot of things I was able to check off my box when I turned 29. And I'm super grateful for that. And so it got me thinking, what is Joel going to do when he turns 30? And I knew what I was expecting. We were going to turn 30 that following year, but I also knew I was going to be getting married. When I turned 28, I had proposed to Lupita. And so in that time coming, I was going to become a husband. And shortly after that, I was going to become a father. And so those are still, well, obviously one of them is done. Next is on the list. And so, again, not many, not one particular reason, but many. And so I'll dive in more and deeper in these reasons, but to kind of give you the story from the beginning. And so with that, I was really anticipating the next big events that were going to happen in my life and how I was going to walk into the 30s, right? Everyone dreads the roaring 20s ending and walking into the 30s. And so it was a little bit of both for me. I was kind of dreading it. I was kind of anticipating it with excitement, but I also knew I've done a lot of the things that I wanted to do, a lot of the goals and the fun that my younger version wanted to do. To backtrack a little more, when I was in undergrad, I had my first mental breakdown where I reached out and called a counselor. I had expressed myself in this imaginary timeline that I had in my head. I believe at that time I was like 23, 22, one of those. And I had this mental map. Lupita at the time wanted to have kids when she was 25. And I was like, no way, Jose. Not that I didn't want it, but I was in that early ages of like, hey, she said 25. I'm going to honor that. So I got to plan around that. So going from undergrad, I tried really hard to get into grad school. I'm not the best student. I'd say I'm a better student now. However, I was not the best student then. I had to try really hard. I almost got kicked out of school. Actually, I did. I'm going to have to say that for another episode. I actually got kicked out of school. But your boys' pen skills are mighty fine, and I was able to repeal it. Maybe I don't need to make an episode, but I could dive in a little deeper then. But there was obviously a moment of redemption for myself. And so going from undergrad, I was about to graduate, and I had to make a choice. Either I go to grad school, become a mental health licensed therapist, or I take a break. Now, in order to become a mental health licensed therapist, what you have to do is you have to go to school. Master's program is 2 years minimum, unless you do a fast track. And then after that, you need 2,000 hours of supervised counseling hours. And so that's about another 2 years. So I'm locked in another 4 years before I actually start making real money. And so in my mind, I'm like, I'm not making real money until I'm out of school and I'm on my own. And with that, I also was mapping out. So in 4 years from 22 to 23, 26, 27, Lupita wants to have kids by 25. I'm going to be in school. I'm not really going to be able to provide. So I'm like, dude, I'm already freaking down a leg, right? So then I'm like, okay, I also want to buy a property. Foreshadowing some future events. I also wanted to buy a property. Lupita and I had this discussion, at a very early age. She was set on it. I was set on it. I also wanted to get married. So I'm like, okay, I got all these life events coming up, right? All these life events that are hitting me very quickly. And I felt like this one decision was going to alter the future. And spoiler alert, it kind of did and didn't. I said that really fast. It kind of did and didn't. And I was just so hung up on like, what do I do? Joel, what do you do? You're young. You have this whole future planned out. And if you don't do this, you will be a failure. And so I thought. In that, I was having just, a mental health crisis, whatever you want to call it. I couldn't think. I was anxious. I was locking myself up. There was times I was like, it would just be better if I was dead. Now, I'm going to be completely transparent. That was an idea. Now, did I ever act on it? Did I ever plan it out? Absolutely not. But in that, knowing that like, hey, bro, those thoughts can go a little further than we expect. And so in that, I was like, yo, you need to figure this out, Joel. Like your grades are going bad. You're not able to cope or do the things that get you out of these ruts. Like it's time for you to ask for some help. And that's where I called my first therapist. And that's when I called my first therapist and I hung up because I was like, yo, this is real. As soon as I heard that phone ring, it just felt real. And so I share that because I want to add a little more meat and potatoes to the reasoning of me living the sober life. And so for 10 years. So with that, I was at my ends wits. I needed to have a conversation. I needed to map it out. Long story short, see a therapist about 2 times. Honestly, I'm just going to be transparent. Like, it really wasn't enough to do anything. So if you're anyone's out there, please take this as an example. Do not go see a therapist for 2 times. Do it more than that. It's definitely not enough to really get anywhere. However, it did help me just process my thoughts and my emotions. We were supposed to do more than just 2 sessions, but the 3rd session was scheduled. However, I was double booked, and so we just never scheduled back. I never got a call back. I also never called back. So to be fair, I think in those 2 sessions, it helped give me some perspective. And of course, I lean into my faith. I lean into my support system and, doing the things that I thought best for Joel at the time to get out of this rut and this mindset. And so in that, your boy decided, let's go to grad school. Let's make this happen. Let's get it done with. The sooner you're in, the sooner you're out. And you start making some real money. In that, part of me didn't want to go down that route because I also didn't want to give up my 20s. The other side of that, of like all these accolades and accomplishment, was like, do I really want to go to grad school now? And the flip side of that, I also just was not wanting to give up those early years. I was like, school's always going to be there. And thinking about going through all that schooling, all that sacrifice, and then ending up at the job and the career that I was going to do for the rest of my life, it scared me. There was something about the monotonous and like knowing that like, hey, this is it. That's all you do. You went to school, graduated, went to grad school, became a counselor, done. Then the rest is history. And so in my honor, there was something about that just, I felt like there was a calling for more. And so also partly was like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. That's a huge commitment. That sounds like I'm going to grow old by the time I'm 30. And your boy's still young. Everybody's young at 30. So with that, again, young Joel talking. And so there's things I wanted to do. I wanted to travel. I wanted to have fun. I wanted to experience life a little more. I sure as hell was not ready for a kid at 25. But I was willing to do that. And so in that, I was having conversations, trying to figure it out. I felt the pressure. I'm like, 25, I got to have a kid. That means we got to get married before then. I'm going to be in grad school, so I'm going to be broke. There ain't no way I'm going to be able to throw a wedding with, not being in and having a job or a career, but definitely want to have marriage before a kid. Maybe I can push having a kid. Maybe we can push that a little bit. And then I want to buy a property. So how am I going to do that if I'm 2 years into grad school and then 2 years out, coming out and probably not getting a full paycheck of what I'm worth because I'm not licensed? So am I really going to actually have enough money? And then I got a bunch of debt on top of that. So as you can see, Joel's mind was very noisy and very busy. And there was a lot going on. And I was just like, ugh. And so in that, I decided to go to grad school. I said, fuck it. Let's do it. Let's run it. Let's just get it done with. In and out. In and out. In and out. You know what I'm saying? So I was just like, the sooner I'm in, the sooner I'm out. Lo and behold, that is not how it worked out. So going back to getting kicked out, my GPA was not the best. I'm just gonna share that with y'all. It was not the best. It was passable. I was able to graduate, but I actually made it on the dean's list 1 quarter. But in that, I was not meeting that required GPA to get into grad school. However, I applied to 2 colleges: Central Washington University and Gonzaga University. I actually was interviewed for both programs, and I didn't make it at Gonzaga, but I made it through Central. And so I was admitted in on academic probation. I accepted it, did not make it, was given a choice: drop out, go get some real world experience, or come back in the fall. But you're not going to have another chance after that. Shout out to my advisors. They really helped young Joel out. And I just was, just don't think I had the best intentions, but I didn't have the right intentions. And so with those conversations and with me trying, it did give me a taste of what grad school was like, right? So I completely understood that grad school is next level. It's definitely 5 steps ahead of undergrad, especially depending on what program you're getting into. Central has a really good program for mental health counseling. Shout out Dr. Nolte. And that shout out you, Dr. Washburn. If you're ever listening to this, man, it'd be dope to have both of y'all on the podcast. Y'all could tell the people a little more about young Joel, maybe a little bit more about present Joel. But with that, I chose the route of getting some real world experience. Talking about being a kinesthetic learner, I work better getting real world context, having real world context, having real world experience. It makes more sense to me. I could read a textbook, but if I could pull from an actual experience that I can relate to in regard to whatever subject it may be, I just work better when I have real world context. And so I took that offer and I took that opportunity and I said, you know what, let me take a break. Let me get some real world experience. And so from there, that started off young Joel, 22, 23, into the real world, and feeling a couple different ways. Feeling like I failed, but also feeling like I did my best. And, just taking it on the chin and moving forward, doing what I do. But I was also really depressed. That's also another episode I should probably touch on, and how I got out of that. Because I'm not going to lie, if it wasn't for the things that I was doing, I needed them. And so we could touch on that another time. But with that, I had a lot of fun in my 20s. We traveled, went to Mexico. First time I went to Mexico was with Lupita and our family. And I went to Mexico again, to Tulum, and it was super fun. We went to a lot of different festivals, the music scene, and EDM. I'm a raver at heart. I'm a bass head. I love good music. I love to dance in the desert with my friends. And that's something that I got to do a lot. Also, your boy locked in a property, of course, with Lupita, but we locked in a property. So I got to travel. I got to have fun. I got to do a lot of different experiences, which I'm huge on. But more importantly, we locked in a duplex. This is where we're at. And so when I got to 29, I was going through my checklist. I'm like, all right, Joel, boom, travel, boom, have fun, boom, went to grad school. I did get that. I'm checking that off because I went. Did I say duplex already? Boom, got the duplex. When I was at 29, I was engaged to Lupita. Boom, marriage is on the list. And so that imaginary timeline that I had and I gave myself was leading up to my 30s. And so here I am at 29, leading that up. And I'm like, all right, Joel, like, you actually had a decent plan and you accomplished a lot on that checklist. Now what's next? That's where I couldn't really answer that. I just want to get married and go from there. But then I really thought about it. I'm like, Joel, think about the decade that you just spent in your 20s. Graduated high school, went to Central Washington University, found roommates, found new friends, made a lot of memories, failed many, many times, was late a lot, still late till this day, but also accomplished a lot, overcame a lot, became a lot of different versions of you in that decade from 20 to 29. And I couldn't really answer what I wanted to do, but I knew there was a lot of potential in me And there was a lot that was going on in our lives that was like, I know what I want more. I want to be financially free. I want to have passive income. I want to be able to spend time with my children. One of the biggest accomplishments I want to be able to check off my list is to be a present father. And if it wasn't for the people and the men in my life, if it wasn't for those young men at the time, because they're all a little bit older now, as I am as well, and learning vicariously through them. One thing I learned about being a man is you have to sacrifice spending time with your family to go work and to provide. Now, I live in Washington. Washington offers maternity leave or paternity leave for men. So I do have a privilege there. I have a privilege that I get to turn around and be like, hey, I'm taking off some time. I'm going to go spend time with my family. However, who really gets to decide how much is enough time for you to spend with your family before you go work a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 8? You know what I'm saying? Who determines that? And honestly, no one really does until the day that we become parents. The day I become a father. Like, I'm sure it's gonna break my heart when I have to leave. When I have to walk out the door knowing that my wife and my child is home and I'm not gonna be there. That scares me. That scares me because I don't want to miss those important moments, those first moments. I want to be present, and not just with my first, but with all of them. And that is my goal. However, I also understand I might vision something, I might plan for something, and more than likely, I'm going to have to adapt. So, in the essence, this is first of many rental properties. This is first of many other ventures of opportunities and investments in business. So, in that, there I am, 29. The summer of me being 28, going into the fall. Now, I am working, established, and I've experienced a lot of different things. But in that, I was asking myself, Joel, it's been a decade. It's been from 20 to almost 30. It's been a decade. When I was 19, I was just getting out of high school, going to school, and doing something huge for myself. It's been a decade since that. And as I reflected, this is reason number one. I have not seen a sober version of Joel since he was in his teenage years. Now, I'm not here to say that like I was drinking on a day-to-day basis. I was using substances on a day-to-day basis. I'm saying like there was one significant point in time from 19 to 29 that I could tell you I was sober, and that was shortly after grad school, after dropping out and looking for a job. I was sober for 7 months, 8 months, and that was the longest time from 19 to 29 years old. And so, as you can tell, I really reflected. I really sat there and thought, I'm like, all right, Joel, when's the last time you were sober, like completely? And in those 7 to 8 months, I think I was still drinking, but I wasn't partaking in, any cannabis or anything like that. But I was trying to stay clean because I needed a job. I needed a big boy job. And so I was like, all the big boy jobs, they do UAs. Spoiler alert, the job that I got into did not UA, which was at working for the state. So in that, I had not seen a sober version of Joel. And I was like, I wonder what that looks like. So that was the beginning of my wheels spinning. I was like, you know what? I have not seen a sober version of Joel. And I want to experience that. If I'm going to live to 100 years old, at least one decade, I should be able to look back and be like, there's a decade in my life that I did not do drugs, I did not do any alcohol, and I was sober. And that's when it kicked off. There's these thoughts, a seed was planted, and every so often I kept coming back to this idea, a sober version of Joel. What does a sober version of Joel look like? I can't answer that. I also can't answer what I want to do in the next decade. In that summer, I decided, or that fall, I believe, I decided we are going to see a sober Joel. And so that's how I led to this goal of being sober for the next 10 years. Time is a perspective. And in that, I wanted to push myself in this next decade. Reason number 2 why I decided to live a sober lifestyle for 10 years was because I can. I say that humbly, I say that respectfully, and I say that with an immense amount of privilege. Now you're probably thinking, Joel, how is that a privilege? That's a choice. You're right. It is a choice. And right now, and at that time, it was my choice. Now, not everybody gets that choice. You kind of do, but there's a point in time when it comes to substances, when it comes to alcohol, when it comes to a constant hit of dopamine, there comes a point where it is no longer a choice. It starts off as a choice, but depending on how we live and how we move, it can easily become in a way that it's not necessarily a choice. And so reason number 2 highlights because I currently can. I rather have the power to be like, you know what, I'm choosing to live sober. Not because I have to. And trust me, there's been a handful of times in my life where that was going to be a choice enforced on me. And I don't want that. If I was going to take my power and I was going to have that kind of power to choose, I wanted it to be on my terms. I didn't want it to be on terms of the courts, on the sacrifice of losing my family, on the sacrifice of harming myself, or the sacrifice of losing something that really mattered to me, like a job. And I've had a decade of experience of doing some dumb things and to have some fun times. And in that, I seen it as me, quote unquote, robbing banks. I've been robbing banks since I was 19 years old until I was 29. And in that, I was scot-free. I thankfully never got a DUI. I did get an MIC when I was like 18. Yeah. Different story for another time. But in that, I've had the privilege to be free and say, I'm choosing this and because I can. And so in that, I wanted to push myself. Touching back on awareness of addiction and substance use, there's a point where we choose to engage in these substances, but there's a time where these substances can control what we do and how we think and what we say. And that is where a chemical dependence is formed, whether that's on alcohol, substances like marijuana. Yes, marijuana, you can become dependent on it. When it becomes, if it's something harder like cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, popping pills, there's a point in time where it's fun and games until it's not. And I lived up until I was 28 knowing that I was really fortunate to not experience something detrimental to me that was self-inducing, if that makes sense. Like, I was very fortunate, and I've definitely counted my blessings. And so in that, reason number 2 was because I knew I could. There wasn't a stronghold. Like, don't get me wrong, it was hard. There's been times where, especially in the beginning year, I was tempted a lot. And so reason number 2 was because I still had that willpower to be able to do that. And I'd rather it be on my terms than on someone else's terms, or because I made a mistake, or I finally got caught rubbing banks. Reason number 3 why I'm choosing to live a sober life for the next 10 years. Fatherhood. Obviously, I went down that list and I checked off a lot of those boxes. And that next transition in my life was becoming a father. Now, I hadn't done such a deep dive on the contributions that males contribute into pregnancy at the time. I was aware of my body not necessarily being the cleanest, if that makes sense. There were substances I was putting in my body, the way I was treating myself, the way I was staying up late, the way I was eating things. And even then, at that time, I was actually on a really great fitness chapter in my life. And even at that, I knew I was in a right headspace of like, hey, this health stuff, this fitness stuff, it only does so much if I'm not taking care of other things on the back end, like getting sleep, eating healthier, and also observing what I'm putting in my body. And so in that, fatherhood was next on that list. And I really wanted to be prepared for that. And I really wanted to detox my body. So at 28, I was already thinking about that. And so I was like, dude, I need to detox. Like, I know, obviously, we pushed that timeline of having kids at 25. We pushed it to 30. Like, we for sure wanted to get married. That was on the radar. And so as we were planning to get married, I knew what came next. And that was, becoming parents. And that's the current chapter that we're in. We'll dive into that a little more later. But in that, where we are at, or I was at, was like, hey, bro, fatherhood's next around the corner. And Joel, you don't need anyone to tell you that what's next. And I also wanted to acknowledge the shit that I was doing and acknowledging that, hey, if you want to have the best chance of having a healthy baby and having a smooth transition into fatherhood and having a smooth pregnancy and having healthy sperm, you need to take full responsibility and accountability for the shit that I was doing. And so, reason number 3, fatherhood. Reason number 4, why I chose to live a sober life for the next 10 years. The journey at the time of experiencing and seeing what my father was going through and my grandfather. Now, for those of you that have been following along with Joel's mind, understand what I say when I say what my father was going through. He was battling cancer throughout that time, and we were able to witness some of the things and some of the reasons, some of the causes of what he was experiencing at his time frame in that age and in his life. And substances was one of those things that was a contributing factor. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say it was the factor, but it was definitely highly influenced. And in that, I also got to witness my grandfather also go through some health changes and health challenges that really put in perspective what you put in your body and the choices that you make at a young age. At some point, those will have an effect. And I was able to have this unique perspective of seeing like, hey, this is what's going to happen if I don't take care of myself at a young age. The shit that I'm actually doing now is actually going to catch up to me at some point. And so that was a huge factor into me making that decision. I need to start now if I want to live a long, healthy life. Reason number 5 as to why I want to live a sober life for the next 10 years. To become a better version of me. Now you're probably thinking like, Joe, isn't this the whole point? Yes, but there's ways you could become a better version of you. And for me, this particular reason was highlighting that there is no way, no shadow of a doubt that I'm not going to become a better version of myself. When I'm not spending money on alcohol, when I'm not spending money on drugs, when I'm not devoting my weekends to recovering and getting shit-faced. And not that I was doing that too often in my later 20s. Definitely did that enough when I was in college. Also not recommending that you do that. Also, if you do it, be safe. But in that, what I'm saying is I knew this was going to make me become a better version of myself. Because I hadn't tapped into this version of me. I don't even know what that vision looks like. So, in essence, I was excited. I was like, you know what, Joel? Like, bro, come on now. practicing what you preach. Like, how can you be so passionate and convicted about becoming a better version of you if you're not doing the things that you need to take care of for yourself? And so in that, I was like, yeah, this is a no-brainer. I know I'm going to become a better version of me. I just don't know exactly how, and I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but let's go ahead and take a gamble. Reason number 6 as to why my goal of living a sober life for 10 years is because I had a lot of fun, people. I've had a lot of fun. I'm not going to lie. Like, I was, quote unquote, robbing banks until, I got caught. And I hadn't gotten caught. Like, there wasn't a time where I landed myself in jail, which is often stories of individuals ending up in this, like, I have a choice. That choice, I put that upon myself. I didn't want that to be the reason. And I will share this story because I was blessed and God was looking out and blessed this officer that really gave me a second chance. Now, I was in a college town. First and foremost, I'm just going to go ahead and throw this out here. I do not condone these actions I'm going to tell you, and I do not condone you to do this whatsoever. If anything, please listen to this story and take what you can from it. But please do not take this as a suggestion on how you should move in your early ages of life. Eat the fish, spit out the bones, people. Do not hold me liable for my shared experience. So in that, we were at a party. At the party, we were drinking. At that time, I was not 21. After a party, you get the munchies, right? It was me and my girlfriend at the time. Y'all can take a wild guess who that was. We wanted some Taco Bell. Now, let me go ahead and paint this picture for y'all, right? I'm driving this car that stood out. That was not my car. It was my girlfriend at the time's car. And where I was driving was very lit up. I was driving around campus, and campus has lights everywhere. And so in that, when I went to go turn on the car and turn on my lights, my dash lights came on. But my day lights were the only ones that came on. It was not my actual headlights. So we pull up to this four-way intersection right next to the library at Central Washington University, and there was a police officer at the stoplight. Now, he was there first, and I'm like, bet, we're good. And I'm having this conversation in my head. Again, this is me robbing banks, metaphorically speaking, of course. I'm like, good, we're good. Cop's there, he's there first. That's his right away. I passed driver's ed on my first time around. I got this, we're good. Pull up to the stop, make a complete stop, right before the line. Picture perfect. You couldn't draw a better picture of me following the law. And so in that, I see in the dark, because it's obviously still dark, I see a little hand wave through the windshield. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm good. He's telling me to go on. So I'm going to go. I have my signal on. I take my left. And I'm driving up towards campus, towards the main road. Cop gets behind me. And whoop. I see the good old red, white, and blue flashing before my eyes. And I'm like, nah, there's no way. There's no way. I did everything I possibly can. I got my seatbelt on. I stopped at the stop sign. Before the stop sign, I waited. He seen me. He waved me. Obviously, I'm straight. And I'm just thinking, there's just nothing. So I'm convinced. I'm like, no way. It's got to be like something. Like, I got a headlight out or something. It's just going to pull me over. So driving into the parking lot of the library, I take my right because we're like on the street, but it's so narrow that like if I stopped in the middle of the road. No one could get around us, through us. So I'm not doing that, obviously, right? Because I'm good. And so I pull into the parking lot and I park into a parking spot, roll down the window, good evening. The reason why I pulled you over was because you don't have your headlights on. You have your daylights on, and you're in a well-lit area. Makes total sense. License and insurance. Motherfucker. Nah, he didn't say that. But I'm like, damn. I'm like, it's cool. We're good, baby. We're good. Like, we'll just, hand it over. Yada, yada. Do our thing. Give him a license. Give him a driver's license and my insurance. Goes to his car. Comes back. And he's like, okay, cool. Here's your stuff back. What are you guys doing out tonight? Oh, nothing. We're just, coming out of a party. We're actually going to go get some food. We want to, we're thinking Taco Bell. It's a little late for Taco Bell, don't you think? I'm like, dog, I've done this before. Taco Bell stays open till like 3 around here. And I want to say it was already 3. And that was me thinking that, yeah, just kind of go to show, just because you think you're good and just because you think you're good at robbing banks doesn't necessarily mean you're always good at robbing banks, metaphorically speaking, of course. So in that, he's like, okay, cool. Well, thanks for letting me know. He's like, I got to ask because I do smell a bit of alcohol. One way or another, that kind of came out. And we're like, oh, yeah, we just came from a party. I must have spilled some on me. Aha. This is his first day, of course, right? Okay, cool. Thank you for telling me. Are you the age of 21? No, sir, I'm not. Awesome. Thank you for telling me the truth. I can do simple math. I knew you weren't 21. Damn, this guy. It's obviously not his first day. So I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you, officer. I'm not 21. Okay, cool. Thank you for being honest with me. Now I got to ask, have you had anything to drink tonight? I'm not going to lie to you, officer. I have. Thank you for being honest with me. Do you know the legal limit for a minor? Officer, if I had to take a wild guess, it's .02. His eyes lit up. He said, wow, that's a good guess, because that is the legal limit of a minor. Now understand, I'm not 21. I'm 20 at this time. I think I might be 19. But anyways, again, I do not condone underage drinking. This is just some shared experience. In that, I was shitting bricks because I'm like, I know what's going to happen next. And in my heart and in my soul, I'm like, I'm not going to jail tonight. This is not happening. I'm not doing this. And so he persists. He's like, do you know how many beers it takes to reach the legal limit of .2? And I was like, all right, gloves are off. No, sir, I do not know the answer to that. He's like, that's about 2 beers. My girlfriend at the time slaps my chest like, oh, you're good. Thanks, baby. And he's like, okay, cool. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, that's about it. That's a fucking lie. That was a lie. Lie. Now, not saying, again, not condoning this. This is just a real world experience. That was not the truth. So, officer now looks at me. He's like, flashlight in my face. Or not really in my face, but like it's up here. I could see it. It's not in my face because it's not like I was blind, but I just like could see the light shining underneath his chin. He's like, okay, now I have to ask you if you're willing to take a sobriety test. And I was like, I'm going to be honest, officer. I will if I have to, but if I don't, I'd be happy. I'd rather not. And his tone changed. And he was like, it is a sobriety test. You can say no. And I thought to myself, like, why are you saying it so crazy? If I can't say no, and I just said no, why are you saying it so crazy? But I also knew if I say no, there's some consequences that comes with that, right? There's a reaction to that answer. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, honestly, officer, if you want me to, I will. But if I don't have to, I prefer not to. Honestly, if I can park in the car right here and walk home, her apartment is right up the road. I'd be happy to leave this car here and walk home tonight. Have I ever told you my God is an awesome God? As I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. There was something about this police officer that did not make me feel threatened, did not make me feel like he was going to challenge me or treat me in a way that was going to make me regret those words. But at the same time, I also didn't know that. I was confident that I didn't do anything wrong. Hindsight 2020, I did. I was drinking and driving. But rest assured, the reason why things ended the way they ended was because he was like, listen, you obviously are good people. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to be honest. I was like, what do you mean by that? Because there's 2 brown people in this car in a majority white town. But I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it. This is one of those few times I'm like, yeah, we those people. And I say that jokingly, of course, but he was like, listen, you've been able to answer my questions and you've been honest with me. And the car is parked in a safe environment. It's not in the way. I'm going to tell you one thing right now. I'm going to cut you a break. He's like, but if I see you tonight driving again, I will make you do a sobriety test. My God is an awesome God we praise. I said, bet. We dapped up. No, I'm just kidding. We didn't dap up. I said, God bless you. Thank you for this chance and letting us walk. And so he looked at me and said, make sure you guys go straight home. I don't want to see you driving tonight. And understand that this night could have gone completely different. Remember that. Good God Almighty. Jesus, my Lord and Savior. I woken up that day. Honestly, shout out to the officer, because moving forward, I was like, Joel, you need to count your motherfucking blessings, bro. You need to count your blessings. And sometimes we get away with shit and we don't hold ourselves accountable afterwards. And it was one of those moments where, Joel, you were having fun. You got caught, bro. You got caught red-handed. You were smart enough and obviously not belligerent. Like, I wasn't intoxicated, but I was also a minor. Like, I shouldn't have been drinking at all. Even though there is you get it. What I'm trying to say is, after that night, it woke my ass up. And I was like, I felt like caveman SpongeBob. You know what I'm saying? I was like, God, I see what you're doing for me, and I'm not going to take this for granted. So ever since then, I learned a lesson at a very young age. And so I had a lot of fun, and I knew how to have fun. I knew it wasn't worth it, bro. I knew I was going to school for something bigger and better for myself. And I knew that if I had gotten a DUI and got caught that night for doing something I should have been doing, my whole future would have been fucked up. My whole future would have been fucked, right? It just would have been completely flipped over on its edge. And that night, I told myself, Joel, you need to count your blessings, bro. You need to pray. You need to give grace and give thanks to God, and just know that you are being looked out for. And also, God bless that man, that police officer that really cut me a break. And so in that, going into my 20s, I was having a lot of fun, but I also was calling taxis. I was calling Ubers. I was walking home. Central is a great little community to go bar hopping, but be safe about it. And so in that, I learned at a young age that it's always fun to go home and to get home safely. And so reason number 6, that's it, baby. I had a lot of fun. And so giving up drugs and alcohol for a whole freaking decade, come on, brother. I've been doing it for a decade already. There's no reason number 7. Going right into reason number 7. My dad had told me at a very young age, something that resonates with me to this day and ever so often when I was a kid. He said, Joel, drugs and alcohol and girls. I was a kid. I was a teenager. Are always going to be there. They're always going to be there. But the time that you have right now and today, you don't. He was talking about school. He was talking about me being in high school and not taking care of what I needed to do. Also, just being an athlete. Like, the time that I had in that moment, it's going by. The drugs, the alcohol, the women, the girls, they're always going to be there. He's like, I'm 30 some years old. Alcohol's still there. Marijuana's still there. If I wanted to go smoke, I could go do that. So shout out my dad. Reason number 7 as to why my goal is to be sober for the next 10 years is because drugs, alcohol, all those substances are always going to be there. But the time I have today and right now is not. Reason number 8. I want to live till I'm 100, baby. I want to live till, more or less, I want to live as long as I possibly can. But when I also want to get to at 100 years old, I want to be able to wipe my own ass. Spoiler alert. Life's not that great when you can't wipe your own ass. Maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe I don't know what that's like. It's been a while since I got my ass wiped. Shout out to all the people that wipe my ass, including my Theo. Thank you, Theo. With that, I just want to be able to have a long life. And towards those end of the years, have some cognitive functioning, have a cognitive functioning brain. I want to be able to taste. I want to be able to see. I want to be able to smell. I want to be able to move. Of course, there's a certain point where your body starts to deplete. It starts to fall apart. Totally get that. But if I can prevent that now, that's what I'm doing. That's my aim. I'm trying to do that. Reason number 8. I hope I got that right. Why my goal is to be sober for the next 10 years. In this moment of me being 28 years old, it was dawning on me that in order for me to be sober for the next 10 years, I was going to lose this version of Joel. And that was hurting me in a way I can't really describe, because the version of Joel that got Joel through his checklist, got through grad school, got to grad school, got to work, got his duplex, engaged to the woman that he prayed for. I had to let that version of Joel go. And in that, I learned that there's versions of me that I've had to let go. There's versions of me that I didn't want to let go. And I understood that in this moment, there was a version of Joel that I needed to let go. A decade is a long time, but it's also not forever. So y'all got to imagine there's an identity formed around alcohol and substances. Your boy could drink. Your boy could have a good time. And he'd like to have a good time. And so I had to let go of having a good time because I didn't know what I looked like not doing those things and having a good time. So there's a point in my journey that I was like, Joel, I got to let you go. And you did nothing wrong. On the contrary, you did a lot of good things right. But this is where we had to part ways. People, I cried. I mourned myself. I mourned a version of Joel because he did his best. He really did his best. He tried very hard to get where he wanted to go and accomplish that. And to say, good job. I'm proud of you. Now it's time to let this version of you go. I've not experienced a certain grief in that nature in a way that really put in perspective what grief looks like, what letting go version of you looks like. but I felt empowered by it because I knew letting go of things and letting go of people and letting go of version of myself didn't have to be messy. And that was the first time I've experienced letting go of something that was not messy. And it was something that really brought me to understanding that it doesn't always have to be messy. You can grieve and let someone go and it be just that, grieving and letting them go without it being messy, without me needing a reason, not me putting myself in a corner where I feel like I had to like fight my way out and get myself into some type of trouble or make some stupid mistake. Like I wanted to let go of a version of me in the most healthiest way. And that was to make peace with, you did a beautiful job, Joel. And thank you for doing that. And thank you for choosing growth and choosing to persevere through all the challenges and all the obstacles that you faced. But now it's time for you to let go of a version of you that's got you there. It's time for you to grow, baby. Reason number 10. I think it's reason number 10. Reason number 10 as to why my goal is to become a sober version of myself for 10 years. Selfishly, I also want to take a tolerance break. I want to take a tolerance break from the alcohol. I want to take a tolerance break from the drugs. I want to take a tolerance break so, because the words of my father, the drugs, the alcohol, they're always going to be there. I want a tolerance break because I do want to indulge in alcohol when it's just a good night out. If it's a celebratory event like my bachelor party or a wedding. And I don't want to be confined by not being able to do something because I'm not in control. Obviously, going through these 10 years, that's a lot of self-control. And I think it's important for me to also model what self-control looks like to my family and to my children. So in that, there's a selfishness that I'm like, I'm taking a tolerance break because one day, who knows? And again, I'm not saying I'm going to, but if I ever end up doing something, the brain will be replenished. Reason number 11 as to why my goal is to live 10 years sober. My family, from both sides, from my mom and my dad, has a history of substance use and substance abuse. And that is something that I want to be able to look at and be like, you know what? This is what it looks like to be sober. There's some new profound perspective of it. And I'm also motivated and pushed by my father. He doesn't drink no more. My brother doesn't drink no more. So there was also an influence of me being like, you know what? I truly didn't think I had a problem with it until I stopped. And then I seen that I'm like, damn, bro, you actually do drink a little more often than you think. You are a little bit of a social drinker on the weekends. And it's so accessible. And so in that, seeing my father, seeing my brother, it also made me think about like the generations to come, like hearing my brother have conversations like, and honestly just, seeing some interactions. I'm like, my kids should be able to see me sober. And I want my kids to see me sober. I want to be present. I don't want to be, shotgunning fucking Coronas or White Claws when it's my baby's 1 year birthday. You know what I'm saying? Like, nah, I definitely don't want to be the party where there's more alcohol than gifts, for my child. Like, I really want to be present. And so I also want to be able to speak and practice and walk the walk of becoming a better version of me and also seeing what that can do for my generations to come and my family. And so reason number 11 is to end generational trauma, to end generational substance misuse, because it is so profound in my family. And it's been an experience to see those relatives of mine, those elders of mine, go through their journeys with their substance use, substance misuse. And I'm grateful for those experiences and the willingness for them to share and to be open. And also, to overcome it as well, because I've seen a lot that has transpired from substance abuse, that it also serves as a gentle reminder that I also can live without it. I don't necessarily need it. I choose it, but do I really want to enter that fatherhood, that chapter, that version of me of having fun? And I'll be honest, I don't. I have the choice to make that decision if I want to enter the fatherhood, this new chapter, a sober version of myself. And so I'm choosing that. Reason 12 why my goal is to live 10 years sober is because of the effects on the brain that alcohol and marijuana has that are long lasting. And there's a doctor, I'm gonna have to tag him because I can't pronounce his last name. I want to say Almond, but it's not. But anyways, this doctor is a neurologist. He's a neurologist, and he studies the effects on the brain and what alcohol does and what cannabis does. And cannabis leads to dementia. Alcohol leads to shrinking of the brain. And so what that essentially means as we get into those older years, our recall, our cognitiveness, which is like our speech, that's all impaired of years and years of substance use or substance misuse. And so I have learned through the years that if I want to live that long, I'm expecting that I'm going to need my brain. And so in that, I've also learned that now I'm kind of shooting from the hip because I can't cite the source, but the most common misconception is that when we lose our brain cells, we don't grow those brain cells back. But there is data and there's research that does show that our brain cells, our brain actually can heal. It will not heal if we're continuing to drink, if we're continuing to do drugs, if we're continuing to live an unhealthy lifestyle. And so from the studies that were done early in like 70s, 80s, 90s, drinking alcohol killed brain cells. It does kill brain cells, but when you're taking those studies and you're conducting studies on people that are continuously living a lifestyle that's killing brain cells, of course the data will show that the brain cells does not grow, doesn't redevelop. And so also through this doctor, I've learned that if I want to live a long life of vitality, I have to give myself a break. I have to let my body heal. And what that requires me is to not partake in substance use, substance misuse, substance abuse, or binge drinking, or even drinking. That is reason number 12. Now, I want to kind of share highlight a moment of what I was experiencing when I chose sobriety. The first 7 to 8 months, I started noticing things. I started noticing how irritable I was. It wasn't right away. It's not like you stop, you quit. It was actually, for me, it was pretty a smooth transition. I was already starting to come back on drinking. I was already starting to come back on smoking a lot because when I smoked, it just wasn't doing what it used to do for me. It really was making me more paranoid, and I was really busy and I was trying to be effective. And every time I smoked, I felt guilty. It just felt like, bro, you should be doing this, but you're over here doing this, and I couldn't enjoy it. And so it just wasn't hitting like it used to hit. And so I had a growing moment. So when I turned 29, I told myself, I'm like, all right, Joel, I came to amends. Turning 20, I was in that year, 28. I'm like, all right, Joel, when you turn 29, you're going to do this. You're going to enter this path of sobriety. And so I did. I cried. I grieved. I mourned myself. I thanked myself. I loved myself. I said, good job. But I said, you know what? You will always be there. But I got to rediscover who I am going into my 30s again. Not that you have to, but that was just something I knew I was going to do for myself because I was going to become a husband and hopefully someday here, Lord willing, a father. And so your boy accepted the challenge. So in that, the first couple months were nice and dandy. I've done tolerance breaks. I stopped It wasn't necessarily quite a challenge until the 7 and 8 month mark. That's when I really started noticing how much the effects were taking place. I became irritable. I became upset. I was like, damn, dude, alcohol's everywhere. No matter what you do, it's accepted socially. Like, I can grab a case, take it to my mom's. You know what I'm saying? Like, it'll be fine. I could take a joint and take it to my mom's. It's going to be fine. Like, I just realized there was just a different perspective. It was a different lifestyle. I'm like, damn, dude. Like, what do we do? I go to the bar. I go to the movie theaters that has the bar and the alcohol there. Like, first of all, the movie's already more expensive because it's just that. And then, but I was like, it doesn't necessarily hit the same. And then, of course, like hang out with friends and family. Thank God we have a great support group and a great group of friends and family that are like, hell yeah, brother, we support your decision. And so in that, I was blessed with some amazing people that are supportive in this journey. So in that, I also just discovered that, you know, it's everywhere. We went on this trip to Chicago for a friend's graduation, and man, I was tempted, 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 tempted like a fat kid that loves cake in a bakery. I was tempted. And one of the few times that my friends were like, hey, we're going to respect your no. So if you say no, we're not going to ask you again. Because most of the time, it's very common for us friends to peer pressure each other into doing things that we don't necessarily want to do. And so one of those times I felt the respect and the honor of what we were trying to do. And thank God Lupita was also on that journey of being sober. She only did it for a year, which shout out to her, because she also wasn't necessarily experiencing what I was experiencing, if that makes sense. Like, she drank less than I did. And she was like, you know, I'm going to do it because you're doing it. And I'm like, love it. And it paid forward because that time I was struggling. And I was like, dude, I know I got to be the strong one. I should be the strong one, but I'm not being the strong one right now. And I was like, look, if you want to break it for this one exception, I'll do it if you do it. Peer pressure, baby. And so, like a real one that she is, like the queen that she is, she came to her king's aid and soothed him and was like, listen, we literally walked to the corner of the room and she said, come here, sit on my lap. Sat that I did. And she was like, look, if we're going to make an exception tonight, when are we going to make the next exception? And when does that exception stop? I'm like, damn, you're saying the things that I didn't want to hear. No, I'm just kidding. But she was right. At what point do we turn around and say, no, tonight, despite that we were there in a new state for us, a different state, celebrating a friend and their accomplishment. And, you know, I was a small group of us, a very intimate group of us. Despite that, this was it would have been a great time to celebrate and partake. When would have been the time to say no? Is basically what she was getting at. And I said, thank you. I really needed that because I was struggling. And ever since then, that one time, and that time to like actually follow through and actually be like, you know what, guys, no. We did it, and I didn't do it alone. I did it with my queen. And she really was the rock that time and helped me stand my ground and be like, yes, we're not doing this. And so guess what happened? We had so much fun. And the best part is I remember every single moment of it. I remember every single conversation, every single laugh, every single dance. It just was such a beautiful time. And I really needed that to show me that, Joel, you can also have fun without drinking, without partaking in any substances. also it's always going to be there, despite like, yeah, the opportunity to celebrate our friend in that specific moment was one in a million, but also getting to experience that sober in the way that I did was also one in a million. Ever since then, it was easier to say no. But as I got into those 7 to 8 months, I started noticing some things about me. Like I was a little more moody. I felt like my emotions were a little more erratic. I also was learning that I had to learn how to have fun again. And as weird as that sounds, and as much as I didn't think I had a problem with drugs or alcohol, but there was a version of me that I hadn't tapped in yet. And so this gave me an opportunity to really rediscover myself. And part of it, it just kind of seemed like, don't get me wrong, like my friends were great, and like being around them while we were drinking, especially after that trip, was a lot more easier. And it was still easy before that, but like I just started noticing I had to sit more with my feelings. I had to think about things a little more. My 10 years of like just socializing and drinking, like I didn't realize how much that it took off the edge. I know I'm not convincing anyone at this point, but what I'm saying is like it just was my way to cope, and I didn't realize I was coping, and I didn't realize that there was things for me to address. But once you take away those devices, those vices, those crutches, those things that you lean into, and really just strip yourself, and you're just like, I'm raw. It never hit me the way it did going into those 7 and 8 months. And then more or less after some time of my two exceptions. Now, I had an exception. I had an exception to, indulge in some alcohol. I'm a bachelor party because, like I said, I chose this sobriety, and I also had the privilege of like saying like, hey, I'm choosing to stay away from it. So I gave myself grace. My bachelor party and also my wedding. Out of the 10 years, those are the only two exceptions that I'm giving myself. Those are now done and said, and so I'm moving forward. But going back to my sobriety after my wedding, I felt it again. I felt the moodiness. I felt the irritable. And I'm like, damn, bro, like there was a lot of emotions going on. There was also a lot of big life events happening, right? Like I just got married, was learning what it means to be a father or father. I mean, you can call me daddy, but you know what I'm saying? I was learning what it means to be a hubby. And there was a lot of other transitions going on. And I had to really relearn how to regulate myself. And that's really what I learned so far being sober for these 2 years. I had to relearn how to regulate Joel and regulate my emotions, and how to take a deep breath and woosah without it being a deep breath of beer or alcohol or other substances. Like I had to relearn what it meant to be a sober version of Joel, because it wasn't until prior to those teenage years like I was a real sober version of me. And so in that, I've really learned and rediscovered a version of me, and I'm still learning that to this day. 2 years sounds like a long time, and I thank everyone that's been super like commendable and been like, dude, that's a long time. Good for you. I'm really proud of you. Thank you so much, because it really does mean a lot to me. But I'm also like, I feel like I'm a 2 year old. Like I'm still scratching the surface. I'm still learning what that means. I joke and I kid. And I'm like, who's counting? I only got 8 more years left, and I'm gonna leave it to that version of Joel when he's 39. When that time comes, if you want to indulge in a drink or whatever it is, that is up to you. But right now, I'm taking care of current Joel, 2025 Joel, 31-year-old Joel. And right now, I'm going to enjoy and endure the journey of what's to come of being sober version of Joel. And I'm really excited for that. And I'm really happy that I pushed myself, and I'm really putting myself in this position to grow, because I want to be able to regulate myself without drugs or alcohol. I want to be able to talk a little more about emotions and how I'm feeling without being influenced by substances or like anything in that nature. And I feel like I did a decent job of like not letting alcohol or drugs be an excuse for doing things that I thought or felt. You know what I'm saying? Those people out there like, oh, I was drunk, I was on one. And so I would have said that if I was sober. Of course you wouldn't have. Of course you wouldn't have said that, because you don't know how to say that when you're sober. That's the problem, people. Like, that's what it is. You don't know how to say what you really feel or what you're thinking, because you're not giving yourself the chance to. You're not allowing yourself to learn. And I'm not gonna lie, it's hard, right? It's easier to get a little liquid courage in you to wash away a little bit of the anxiety or a little bit of the stress. But is that really the most efficient version of you to get a point across, to speak your mind, to open up your heart and be like, hey, when you do this, it makes me feel like this. When you do this, it makes me feel loved, makes me feel seen. When you do this, this makes me feel isolated. This makes me feel left out. Let me tell you right now, you don't need alcohol, you don't need drugs, you don't need any of that substance to be able to speak your mind. And you also don't need that courage to act out of pocket or out of character or be messy about it. The only messy thing we're doing when we're using substances and alcohol to mask how we really feel is we're really taking our power away in our voice, because we're teaching ourselves that I can't fully engage or express myself in a way that is true to myself and authentic to myself unless I'm drinking or unless I'm doing drugs. And who's to say that version of you on drugs and drinking is actually communicating how you really feel when you're sober, when the dust settles, when the hangover is done, when you wake up and your tongue is dry as fuck because you're dehydrated, or you got this green hangover, or your sinuses are clogged. And you know what I'm saying? You owe it to yourself to learn what a sober version of you looks like. And if you're on this journey becoming a better version of you, I highly encourage you to take the leap, and whatever that looks like for you, whether that's a year, whether that's 6 months, whether it's 30 days, whether it's 5 years, or if you're just diving into the deep end and saying, Jesus, take the wheel, I'm done, and this is it. I support it. I believe in you. You can do it. You're worthy. You're powerful. You're full of potential. It's only up to you to make that choice, to make the decision on what a better version of you looks like. So with that, that is all for today. With that being said, tap into your boys' social medias, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Follow me on Facebook. Follow me on YouTube. Follow me on Apple, Spotify. Hit that subscribe button so whenever I drop an episode, you can get that. Expect 2 days out of the month of Joel's Mind Podcast. Joel's Mind Podcast is talking about becoming a better version of you. This is a space for those that are indulging and pushing themselves to grow, to develop. Think of it as a self-help podcast, but also think of it as perspective. Eat the fish and spit out the bones. So with that being said, have a good morning, have a good afternoon, have a good evening. Happy birthday. I love you.